The typewriter keys were still dusty when I pressed them that grey December morning, and the ribbon had long since dried to nothing more than faded impressions, but there, wedged between the machine and the back of my father's old desk, was a single sheet of paper that would unravel 27 years of silence. I had returned to the house where I grew up to settle my father's affairs, 3 months after the heart attack that took him while he sat in this very chair, probably grading papers, as he had done every evening for 34 years. The study remained exactly as he had left it. Books stacked in precarious towers, red pens scattered like fallen leaves across student essays, and the ancient Underwood typewriter that had belonged to his father before him, sitting like a monument to words, both written and unwritten. The December rain drummed against the tall windows, casting shifting shadows across the Persian rug my mother had chosen before I was born. Everything in this room spoke of permanence, of a man who had believed in the power of words to shape young minds and change the world, one carefully crafted sentence at a time. The leather-bound volumes of Shakespeare and Dickens stood sentinel along the walls, their spines worn smooth by countless readings, while the mahogany desk bore the scars of decades, water rings from countless cups of coffee, ink stains from fountain pens, and the gentle depression where his forearms had rested as he worked late into the night. I had been avoiding this room for weeks, finding excuses to sort through closets and kitchen cabinets instead. Anything to delay confronting the heart of who my father had been. We had not spoken in 5 years, not since the argument that split our family like a fault line, leaving my mother to shuttle between us like a diplomat, in a war that neither side remembered how to end. The silence had grown so heavy over the years that it had become its own presence in our lives, shaping every phone call that wasn't made, every holiday invitation that remained unextended, every grandchild's milestone that went unshared. But here I was at last, in the sanctuary where he had retreated every evening after dinner, where he had prepared his lessons and graded his papers and, I now realised, where he had wrestled with thoughts he could never bring himself to speak aloud. The typewriter had caught my attention because it seemed out of place, not in the room, where it had sat for as long as I could remember, but in its positioning. Someone had moved it recently, pulling it forward from its usual spot against the wall. As I reached to push it back, my fingers brushed against something trapped in the narrow space behind it. The paper was yellowed and brittle, folded just once down the middle, and when I pulled it free, I saw my name typed across the top in the familiar font of his old machine. My hands were steady as I unfolded it, steadier than they had been in weeks, but my heart was beating so loudly I was certain the neighbours could hear it over the sound of rain against glass. The date at the top made my breath catch. March 15th, 1997, 3 days after our final argument, the one that had ended with doors slamming and words spoken in anger that could never be taken back. The letter began without salutation, as if he had started typing before he had fully decided what he wanted to say. I have been sitting at this desk for 3 hours, trying to find words that feel adequate for the weight of what needs to be said. The cursor on the page mocks me with its steady blinking, waiting for wisdom I'm not certain I possess. But silence has become a luxury I can no longer afford, even if these words never find their way to you. 3 days have passed since you walked out of this house, and I have replayed our conversation 1,000 times, searching for the moment when I could have chosen different words, a different tone, a different path through the minefield we had created between us. I keep returning to the look in your eyes when I told you that you were throwing your life away, that your choices would lead nowhere but disappointment and regret. I have never seen such pain in a human face, And knowing that I was the author of that pain has left me sleepless and hollow. You came to me that night seeking understanding, perhaps even approval, and I met you with judgment dressed up as concern. You spoke of your dreams with such passion, such clarity of purpose, and I responded with fear masquerading as practical wisdom. I told you that art was a luxury you couldn't afford, that security should triumph over aspiration, that the world would be kinder to you if you chose a path more traveled and less uncertain. But what I couldn't tell you, what I have never been able to tell you, is that every word I spoke was a reflection of my own failures, my own compromises, my own surrender to the safer choice. When I looked at you that night, fire in your eyes and canvases stacked against your bedroom wall, I didn't see my daughter. I saw myself at 23, standing in this very room with acceptance letters from art schools scattered across this same desk, while my own father argued for teaching over creating, for stability over risk. I chose the practical path, just as my father had insisted I should. I became a teacher because it was respectable and reliable, because it offered insurance and a pension and the approval of people who equated success with security. I put away my brushes and my dreams of gallery showings and convinced myself that shaping young minds was nobler than creating something beautiful from nothing. For 34 years, I have stood in front of classrooms and taught literature and writing to students who reminded me daily of what I had abandoned. Every passionate essay about following one's dreams, every creative project that sparkled with original thought, every young face lit up with the same fire I had once carried. They were mirrors reflecting back the life I had chosen not to live. And when you came to me with that same fire asking for my blessing to pursue what I had been too afraid to chase, I couldn't bear to see you succeed where I had surrendered. So I tried to extinguish your flame with the same cold water that had been poured over mine, telling myself I was protecting you when I was really protecting the fragile peace I had made with my own regrets. But you are not me, Sarah. You are stronger than I was at your age, braver than I have ever been in my 57 years. You have a talent that demands expression, a vision that deserves to be shared with the world. The paintings in your room, the ones I pretended not to notice, the ones I dismissed as hobbies when your mother showed them to me. They sing with a voice that is uniquely yours. They capture light and emotion in ways that make me remember why I once believed that art could save the world. I should have told you this 3 nights ago. I should have said that your work takes my breath away. That watching you paint in the garage when you thought no one was looking has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. I should have admitted that every time I walk past your easel and see another world taking shape under your brush, I am reminded of what it means to create rather than simply consume. Instead, I let my own disappointments speak louder than my love for you. I let my fear of your potential failure overshadow my joy in your certain gift. I chose the role of critic over champion, of cautioner over encourager, and in doing so, I became the very voice that had once silenced my own dreams. Your mother tells me you're planning to move to Chicago to share an apartment with 3 other artists and work nights to pay for studio space. She says you've been accepted to show 3 pieces in a group exhibition next month, and that a gallery owner has already expressed interest in your work. These should be celebrations, milestones worthy of champagne and congratulations, but instead, they feel like evidence of how badly I have failed you as a father. I want you to know that I am proud of you, not despite your choice to pursue art, but because of it. I am proud of your courage, your integrity, your refusal to compromise your vision for the comfort of others. I am proud that you listened to your heart when it would have been easier to listen to me. I am proud that you are becoming the person I was too afraid to be. If these words ever reach you, I hope you will understand that my fear was never about you. It was about the part of myself I buried so long ago that I had forgotten how to recognize it in someone else. When I see you paint, I remember what it felt like to believe that beauty mattered more than balance sheets, that meaning could be measured in something other than monetary terms. You asked me once why I never paint anymore, why the easel in the attic gathers dust while I grade papers about other people's creativity. I told you I didn't have time, that teaching was a full-time calling. But the truth is that I stopped painting because every brushstroke reminded me of the life I had chosen not to live. And that reminder was too painful to bear. Watching you refuse to make the same choice has been both the greatest joy and deepest sorrow of these past few years. Joy, because you have the strength I lacked. Sorrow, because your strength only highlights my weakness. I know that words on a page cannot undo the damage I have done with words spoken in anger. I know that this letter cannot bridge the distance I have created with my inability to support the very dreams I should have nurtured. But perhaps it can be a beginning, a first step toward the conversation I should have had with you years ago, before pride and fear built walls too high for either of us to climb. Your mother has shown me the newspaper clipping about your upcoming exhibition. The headline reads, "Young Artists to Watch." And there, beneath a photograph of one of your paintings, is your name in print. I have carried that clipping in my wallet for 2 weeks, reading it whenever I need to remember that not all dreams die from lack of faith. I want to be there opening night, standing in the back of the gallery, watching strangers discover what I have been too stubborn to acknowledge, that you are an artist not because you choose to be, but because you cannot choose to be anything else. Art is not your career, or your hobby, or your rebellion against practical advice. It is your language, your way of making sense of a world that offers beauty and pain in equal measure. Go to Chicago, my dear daughter. Paint until your fingers ache and your back is sore and your heart is so full of colour that it spills out onto canvas. Show the world what I have been privileged to witness but too afraid to celebrate. Create the life I was too cowardly to claim for myself. And if you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man who confused his own limitations with universal truths, perhaps we can find our way back to each other. Perhaps we can have the conversations I should have initiated years ago, the ones where I listen more than I speak, where I ask about your work instead of questioning your choices. I miss you, Sarah. I miss our Sunday morning breakfasts and your laugh echoing through these rooms, and the way you used to seek my advice before you learned that my fear was louder than my wisdom. Most of all, I miss the chance to tell you how proud I am to be your father, not because of what you might become, but because of who you already are. The rain has started again while I type these words, and I can hear it running down the gutters like tears the house is finally allowing itself to shed. There is so much more I want to say, but words feel inadequate for the size of the apology I owe you, the magnitude of the love I have been too proud to express properly. Perhaps this letter will never leave this desk. Perhaps I will fold it away with all the other words I have been too afraid to send into the world. But writing it has changed something in me, has reminded me that the most important words are often the hardest ones to say. You are my daughter, my pride, my greatest teacher in the art of courage I never learned. You are the artist I was afraid to become, and the person I am grateful to have raised, even when I failed to show you that gratitude when it mattered most. Paint, my darling girl. Paint like your life depends on it, because it does. Paint like the world needs your vision, because it does. Paint like your old father finally understands that safety is not worth sacrificing soul, because at long last, he does. With all the love and regret and hope I can fit onto these pages, Dad. I don't remember sinking into his chair, but that's where I found myself when the letter finally slipped from my hands. The pages scattered across the desk like the pieces of a puzzle I had been trying to solve my entire adult life. The rain continued its steady percussion against the windows, but now it sounded different. Not like tears, but like applause, like the world celebrating truths finally spoken, even if they had taken 27 years to reach their intended audience. 27 years had passed since he typed those words, and in that time I had indeed gone to Chicago. I had shared apartments with other struggling artists and worked late shifts to pay for canvas and paint. I had shown in galleries and sold pieces and even, eventually, made enough from my work to quit the restaurant job that had sustained me through those early years. But the success had felt hollow without his knowledge. Each milestone reached in the shadow of his disapproval. I had married and divorced, and married again. Had built a life that looked exactly like the one he had warned me against, and yet somehow it had turned out beautiful anyway. I had learned that security could be built from something other than steady paychecks, that art could indeed pay the bills if you were willing to work hard enough and believe long enough. He had died while I was preparing for my first solo exhibition in New York, the culmination of 3 decades of painting through joy and heartbreak and everything in between. I had seen the obituary online while hanging my pieces, had felt the familiar stab of grief mixed with anger, had told myself that it was too late for reconciliation, that some silences could not be broken even by death. But he had known. Somehow, in those final months of his life, he had known about the exhibition. On his desk, beneath a stack of student papers, I found the printout of the gallery's website, my artist statement highlighted in yellow marker, my photograph circled in red ink. In the margins, in handwriting that had grown shakier with age, he had written notes, observations about my technique, questions about my inspiration, pride disguised as art criticism. He had been following my career for years, collecting reviews of my shows, printing articles about my work, building a secret archive of his daughter's achievements that he could never bring himself to acknowledge aloud. The drawer of his desk held 27 years of evidence. Gallery postcards, newspaper clippings, even a catalogue from a group show I had participated in 5 years earlier, with his business card tucked inside as a bookmark. The letter explained everything and nothing, answered questions I had carried for decades while raising others I would never be able to ask. But mostly, it offered me the gift I had been seeking since that terrible night when I walked out of this house carrying nothing but my anger and my certainty that he would never understand. His approval, his pride, his recognition that the path I had chosen was not just valid, but necessary. I sat in his chair until the rain stopped and the winter afternoon gave way to early darkness, reading his words again and again, memorizing the rhythm of his regret and the weight of his love. The house grew cold around me, but I felt warmer than I had in years, wrapped in the knowledge that the silence between us had never been complete, that love had been speaking even when voices were still. Tomorrow I would call my mother and tell her about the letter. I would share the burden of his regret and the gift of his belated blessing. I would begin the work of grieving not just his death, but the years we had lost to pride and fear, and the terrible assumption that understanding required words spoken aloud. But tonight, I simply sat in the gathering darkness with his letter spread before me, feeling the presence of a father who had loved me enough to write the words he could never bring himself to say, who had believed in me even when his fear spoke louder than his faith. The last line of the letter glowed in the lamplight like a benediction. Paint, my darling girl. Paint like your life depends on it, because it does. And I understood, finally, that some letters are not meant to be sent in envelopes, but delivered by time itself, arriving exactly when the heart is ready to receive what it has always needed to hear, that we are loved, that we are understood, that our choices matter even when they frighten the people who care about us most.